He used to be called Citizen 625726. He used to call himself Unbroken. When he left his dystopian city behind, he thought he had found paradise. What he found was uglier and darker than anything he could have imagined. This is his story. This is Inferior. Now available in ebook, paperback, and audio form. Links in the description.
But there's one thing even David Lopan must acknowledge. All movement in the universe is caused by tension between positive and negative furies.
When the furies are out of balance,
As they are in Lopan, who is cursed.
then the people turn into demon and live forever.
Repulsive and evil, existing only to plague the living.
Well, then, I mean, what you're saying is this David Lopan, what is he, a ghost?
Plays at being a man, creature of vast, dark, destructive power.
Last time, Otomo Jama, power-hungry younger brother of Emperor Hantei XI of Rokugan, went on a pilgrimage to lands beyond the Emerald Empire, where he discovered the means of gaining immortality and immunity from the taint, thus achieving his final form as the dread sorcerer Iuchiban the Blood Speaker. Having removed his own heart via a magic ritual, he now possessed the means to use evil magic to its fullest extent without suffering the bad side effects of corruption. And so he returned to Rokugan, preparing to set in motion a plan that he believed would secure him the Chrysanthemum throne. No date is given to exactly when he returned to the Emerald Empire, but we must presume that it was before the year 504, for reasons that will be relevant later. Upon being welcomed back to the Empire, Iuchiban began to do some serious networking. As you might expect with the politics of the imperial court, there are both winners and losers, and Iuchiban soon found a following among the latter. Thus, he gained for himself a network of informants who were eager to cozy up to him in the expectation of advancement. More importantly, he began to win to his side shugenja of various talents who became his devoted followers, secretly calling themselves the Blood Speakers in tribute to him. Apparently, there were quite a few such individuals who were easily tempted by the promise of power that Maho offered, and Iuchiban decided that they needed a meeting place. He chose, very deliberately as it would turn out, a sacred temple right next to an important cemetery that housed the bodies of all the greatest heroes in the history of the Emerald Empire. He was able to do this by slowly, one at a time, replacing the monks in charge of that temple with each of his magically inclined followers. But more than followers, Iuchiban needed tools to carry out his plan. He discovered one such tool in 504 while visiting the Imperial Treasury, a magical ruby the size of an egg. No one knew who created it or how it came to be there, but there it was. What would be known ever after as the Ruby of Iuchiban, and its namesake soon discovered that he could use it to capture the souls of his enemies. Interesting, but not nearly as useful to his plan as what he had Asahina Yajinden make for him. By the year 508, the former Crane Shugenja had created 4 swords on the Anvil of Despair, that evil magic artifact that had driven the entire Boar clan to destroy itself. What Yajinden made upon that anvil were called the Blood Swords. 4 katanas imbued with a thirst for blood that would never be quenched. It is said that when Yajinden forged the Blood Swords, he bound the soul of a great hero into each one of them, imbuing the swords with the martial prowess of these great heroes, while also twisting their souls into dark reflections of the honorable warriors they had once been. In life, they had been defined by their noblest qualities. In death, their warped and tormented spirits were bound to the steel of the swords by their worst qualities. And it was these worst qualities that would bestow upon the Blood Swords their names: Yashin, Jonetsu, Fukushu, Handan. Ambition, passion, revenge, judgment. With his tools, Iuchiban could now begin to set his plan in motion. The plan, like most decent plans, was simple. The blood swords would each be gifted to 4 of the most prominent clan leaders in the Emerald Empire. The malevolent influence of the blood swords would drive each of those clan leaders to madness and death. While the Empire was racked with confusion by what was going on, he himself would raise an army of the dead from within the walls of Otosan Uchi itself, take the palace, wipe out his brother and his bloodline, and then install himself upon the Chrysanthemum throne. Thus, Iuchiban would reign as the undying Emperor of Rokugan. Interesting side note, there is a module within the L5R RPG that mentions a 5th blood sword that Yajinden didn't complete until much later called Treason, but it's never mentioned in the lore, so it's not really relevant here. At any rate, in 508, shortly after completing the 4 blood swords, Yajinden, in compliance with the will of his master, gifted the blood swords each in turn to 4 clan champions. Fukushu was gifted to Akodo Mekuko, clan champion of the Lion and right hand of the Emperor. Jonetsu was given to Doji Tanaka, champion of the Crane clan and left hand of the Emperor. Yashin was bestowed upon Bayushi Rikoji, Scorpion clan champion and underhand of the Emperor. Last, Handan was given to Hida Tenburo, champion of the Crab clan, one of the most powerful clans militarily speaking, and one highly experienced in dealing with Maho. It does beg the question why Iuchiban didn't try to subvert the Phoenix clan in a similar way, as they were the most powerful in terms of magic, but perhaps he felt it was too great a risk, given that the Phoenix clan didn't have one leader like all the others, but was instead ruled by the Council of 5, Master Shugenja, whose knowledge of magic might have enabled them to see the evil of whatever gift he might have tried to bestow upon them. Either way, the blood swords were not slow in corrupting the minds of those to whom they were given. The following year, 509, saw the mysterious deaths of both Hida Tenburo and Akodo Mekuko. Each of the blood swords sought to corrupt its holder in different ways. In the case of Handan, or Judgment, it inflamed Hida Tenburo's sense of discernment, causing him to become increasingly hostile towards even the slightest infraction, manipulating him into judging those around him more and more harshly by increasingly unrealistic standards. The clan champion began to view those around him with increasing hostility. With each passing day, they seemed less worthy, more imperfect. Even the most minor failing or mistake was magnified in his eyes 1,000-fold. At last, one night in a fit of madness, Tenburo slaughtered his personal guard and then murdered his own children, deeming them all unworthy of the legacy of the Kami Hida, divine founder of the Crab clan. He then turned the blood sword on himself, judging that he too was unworthy. Shocked and confused, the Crab clan didn't know what to make of the situation. They never seemed to have made a connection between Tenburo's behavior and the blood sword, so they simply stored it away somewhere. In the case of Akodo Mekuko, the change was even more dramatic and unaccountable, for she had always been thought of as being a level-headed woman. But the blood sword revenge began to work away at the Lion Champion's mind and soul, gnawing away at her reserve the way a silkworm gnaws through mulberry leaves. Mekuko became increasingly sensitive to slights, real or perceived. The breaking point finally came in the year 509 when she heard an offhand remark about her made by one Togashi Moho. Togashi Moho was an Ise-zumi, known for his frankness of speech and upright honesty, qualities that Hantei XI so admired that he made the dragon monk one of his personal advisors. Of course, the problem with being so bluntly spoken is that people can easily interpret such statements as insulting to themselves. Even so, the court was shocked when Mekuko took such offense at Moho's words that she challenged him to a duel. As a ruler of one of the great clans, and thus one of the most powerful and high-ranking people in the empire, even Hantei XI had no choice but to allow the duel to carry on. 3 days later, the monk faced off against the general. Regardless of how close the fight otherwise may have been, One of the abilities of Fukushu was that it rendered its wielder more resistant to any kind of damage, though at the same time it also drove its holder into a berserker state, not allowing the wielder to stop until the opponent before him or her was dead. So it proved with Akodo Mekuko, and Togashi Moho died on the point of Fukushu. But of course, this was not a duel that left Mekuko covered in honor or glory. Even members of her own clan considered her behavior beyond the pale. Those members of the Dragon Clan that were operating within the capital responded to the killing of Moho by quietly leaving Otosan Uchi and returning to their own lands. Goaded by the blood sword, Mekuko considered this departure to be an insult not just to her, but to the Emperor. And so, Mekuko raised an army of 20,000 lion samurai and marched on the mountains of the Dragon Clan. Never mind that it was the middle of winter. Never mind the fact that the lion warriors were forced to climb the sheer peaks of the Dragon Mountains in order to get to Kyuden Togashi. Mekuko was thoroughly blinded by the desire for revenge, and so she delivered herself and her army into the waiting hands of the dragon, in what came to be known as the Red Snow Battle. Of the 20,000 lion samurai, only 2,000 lived to tell the tale. Crushed and defeated, Mekuko committed seppuku on Fukushu's point, but not before relaying what had happened to the Ikoma storyteller Ikoma Sakumi. Red Snow Battle would go down as one of the greatest failures and the greatest embarrassments in the history of the Lion Clan. From that day forward, the very name Akodo Mekuko would become synonymous with failure. The blood sword itself was recovered by the Dragon Clan and taken to Shiro Agasha for further study. But it seems that the Dragon Shugenja could make neither heads nor tails of it. That's 2 rulers of 2 of the great clans dead in a single year. A third was to join them in the year 510. Jonetsu, the blood sword given to Crane Clan champion Doji Tanaka, had taken slightly longer than its 2 cousins. But it too had worked away at the clan champion's soul, inflaming his desires and causing him to see anyone or anything that stood between him and what he desired as a threat to be eliminated. When he finally snapped, it was in just as dramatic a fashion as Hida Tenburo's breakdown. Without any warning, the Crane Clan champion murdered his entire family, professed to be in love with an 11-year-old geisha to his entire court, and then promptly jumped off the cliffs of Kyuden Doji, taking Jonetsu with him. Chaos and confusion were being sown all across the empire, just as Ichiban had desired. But here, the Blood Speaker's luck ran out, and all because of the recipient of the 4th blood sword, Yashin. As one might expect from the Lord of the Scorpion Clan, Bayushi Rikoji was an untrusting and suspicious soul. From the very beginning, he'd suspected that something was off about this mysterious gift he'd been given, and had refused to so much as touch the blood sword. The strange and mysterious deaths of 3 of his peers in relatively quick succession only reaffirmed his suspicion that something foul was afoot. It didn't take long for his spies to discover that, like him, Doji Tanaka, Akodo Mekuko, and Hida Tenburo had themselves mysteriously received swords as gifts from an unknown benefactor. Now thoroughly convinced that the sword was cursed, Rikoji had Yashin locked away in one of the vaults of Kyuden Bayushi, never to be touched. Now the question was, who had sent him and the other 3 these mysterious gifts, and why? Obviously, Rikoji could not undertake the investigation himself. As Scorpion Clan champion, he was simply too public a figure. Word that he was heading an investigation of some kind would eventually get out and possibly put the suspect on notice. So instead, he chose to delegate the task of finding out the source of the blood swords to a young up-and-coming Scorpion magistrate named Soshi Takasho. Takasho wasted no time. And alas, there are no details as to his investigation. He did very quickly trace his master's strange gift and that of the other blood swords to a certain Asahina Yajinden, currently residing in the capital. Entering the capital under an assumed name, Takasho began making what he thought were discreet enquiries. He asked as to where someone like Yajinden might be found, and eventually he was directed to a small temple abutting the ancestral mausoleum, the great cemetery where all the greatest heroes of Rokugan had been buried over the centuries. Unfortunately, on the night that Takasho decided to sneak over towards the temple and see what was going on, he was accosted by one Akodo Minobe, a Lion Clan samurai and member of the Imperial Guard. It seems Takasho was not as discreet as he'd thought he was being, as Minobe had noticed his inquiries and had become suspicious of him. Naturally, because Takasho was a scorpion, Minobe suspected that he was up to something dirty and treacherous against the Empire. Of course, Takasho protested his innocence, and of course Minobe did not believe him. In the end, though, the two agreed to at least approach the temple together and see if they could find out what was going on. It didn't take long for the two samurai to discover that the monks were hiding something. His suspicions already on full alert, Minobe decided to go back and get reinforcements from the Imperial Guard, while Takasho chose to infiltrate the temple. Disguising himself as a monk, he managed to sneak inside and beheld the other monks performing a ritual over the corpse of Shiba Dorataki, a warrior of the Phoenix clan who had died heroically at the Battle of the White Stag. To his horror, Takasho saw the monks place a white porcelain mask upon the corpse, and the corpse stood. Somehow, the newly animated zombie sensed Takasho's presence and attacked him. The Scorpion Magistrate only narrowly managed to survive by ripping the mask off of the corpse, whereupon it simply collapsed back into death. Whatever these mysterious and malevolent conspirators were or what they planned, Takasho knew that they were now aware that someone was onto them. There wasn't much time. He managed to find Minobe just as the Lion Samurai was returning with 200 Imperial Guardsmen and informed him of what was going on, that there was a cult of Mahotsukai residing in the temple and that they were planning to raise an army of the dead to take the capital, and that their leader was none other than the Emperor's own brother. Takasho was entirely correct. Iuchiban now knew that someone was onto him. He needed to act now. And so, a hurriedly raised army of zombies clashed with the Imperial Guardsmen in what became known as the Battle of Stolen Graves. Wave upon wave of reanimated dead, zombified remains of what had once been the greatest heroes the Empire had known, threw themselves upon Minobe and his guardsmen. Messengers were sent to summon what help they could find, and it seemed that aid would be sorely needed, for the corpses seemed immune to whatever blows the samurai struck against them. Then, Akodo Minobe, standing at the forefront of his men, managed to decapitate one of the corpses and saw it fall to the ground, never to rise again. The Imperial Guardsmen took heart. This undead horde was not, in fact, invincible. If their heads were removed, they could be killed. The word got out, and soon all the capital was aware of what was going on near the ancestral mausoleum. The Imperial Palace was full of many guests of all clans across the Empire, who had of course brought with them their personal retinues and their bodyguards. And so, bit by bit, Minobe and his guardsmen found themselves reinforced by samurai of every clan from across the Emerald Empire. Warriors from clans great and small threw themselves unhesitatingly into the fight against the undead horde. And now that they knew how to kill them, the tide slowly but surely began to turn against the Blood Speakers. Luck or the will of heaven was on the side of good that day. Minobe and Takasho had exposed the plot before it had reached full fruition. There simply hadn't been time for Iuchiban and his followers to turn all of the corpses in the ancestral mausoleum into zombies. And now, as the ranks of the living swelled, the ranks of the walking dead began to thin, and Iuchiban realized that his cause was lost. The Blood Speaker retreated into the temple, hoping to escape via a secret passage. Akodo Minobe pursued him, and even managed to plunge his spear through the Mahotsukai, but it was to no avail. For of course, Iuchiban was invulnerable to physical harm. But then, when he was near the exit of the secret passage, he found Soshi Takasho waiting for him. A true son of the Scorpion clan, Takasho had suspected that the Blood Speaker would have prepared a bolt hole, and while both sides had been distracted by the battle, had discovered the passage and lain in wait for his enemy to come to him. Caught by surprise, Iuchiban was slow off the mark, and Takasho paralyzed him with a powerful spell before he could call upon his dark powers. Soon enough, loyal servants of the Emperor arrived on the scene, and the Blood Speaker was subdued and taken into custody. They would have executed him, but they soon discovered that Iuchiban could not be killed. Jamasuru had long since disappeared with his master's heart, and so long as no one could find and destroy it, there was simply no way to kill the Emperor's former brother. The best they could do was imprison him and make a good enough job of it that he could never escape. And so, Emperor Hantei XI called upon the Kaiyu family, headed by the genius engineer Kaiyu Gineza, to construct the Tomb of Iuchiban, a stone crypt situated beyond the Kaiyu wall in the southwest, riddled with pitfalls and traps, infused with the most powerful spells of both the Phoenix clan and the Scorpion clan. Some accounts say that Kaiyu Gineza himself stayed behind inside the tomb to activate the traps, thus imprisoning himself within, sacrificing himself for the Empire. Other sources claim that the Scorpion clan assassinated him shortly after the tomb's completion, so as to ensure that the secrets of disabling the traps could never be released. The tomb itself was 3 months in the making, and at the heart of it all would lie a small, unimpressive stone chamber containing an iron casket banded with bars of the purest jade. It was in here that the undying body of Iuchiban would be imprisoned for all time. Hopefully. As double insurance, 2 false tombs were constructed, and over the years, Scorpion magistrates would allow the existence of the false tombs to become known. Most of Iuchiban's followers had been captured and executed after the Battle of Stolen Graves, but a few had survived. And, just as the Scorpion had always intended, those few survivors and their disciples would, over the years, find their deaths in those false tombs, in futile efforts to free their dread master. For their services, Akodo Minobe and Soshi Takasho were hailed as heroes. Both achieved high rank within the court, Minobe as a personal advisor to the Emerald Champion, Takasho as one of the most celebrated of the Emerald Magistrates. Of Iuchiban's followers, only Asahina Yajinden was not executed. Instead, he was taken into the custody of the Crane clan. The Asahina family decided, instead of killing him, to magically erase his memory, and thus the mind-wiped Yajinden would live out his days as a lowly gardener in Otosan Uchi, under constant covert surveillance. The fact that the Emperor's own brother had turned out to be a Mahotsukai had the potential to be greatly dishonorable and shameful for the imperial family. And so, by order of Hantei XI, an alliance was formed between the Ikoma family of the Lion Clan and the Shosuro family of the Scorpion Clan. The 2 families were to work together henceforth to cover up anything that might embarrass or disgrace the Hantei line. The Shosuro would destroy evidence, the Ikoma would omit it from their histories. The Shosuro also fabricated several different origin stories for Iuchiban to further muddy the waters. The Shosuro-Ikoma alliance would last for centuries, and would do a very good job of hushing up and clearing away any emperor's dirty laundry. Perhaps the greatest legacy of the Battle of Stolen Graves was its effect on Rokugani funerary practices. Afterwards, Emperor Hantei XI decreed that henceforth all dead bodies were to be cremated, so that a Mahotsukai like Iuchiban could never raise the dead against the Empire. Never again would the bodies of the honored dead be desecrated by evil magic. And that was the first, although unfortunately not the last, rising of Iuchiban, the Blood Speaker.